Come to order, please. If you have any cell phones or electronic devices, I ask you to mute them or turn them off at this time. Then I'll ask Mr. Jones to lead the invocation and the pledge.
Our Father, we're grateful for today and this time. Lord, we thank you for allowing us to come together to take care of the business for our great county. We thank you for these who have come to join us. Lord, we pray tonight for strength, wisdom, and guidance. And Lord, we pray, as your word says, that everything be done decently and in order. In your name, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the record, Miss Commander will not be present tonight due to an illness. Can't speak to where Miss Cindy is, Susan. Okay, well, we'll move on then. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No, sir. We're proud to report.
Thank you. All right, first thing on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. A motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Let's see, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our first item is Ms. Holly Holt from the Health Department. You want to take public comments?
Yes, hang on, Miss Holly. Is there any public comments concerning any agenda item present? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Miss Holly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today just basically for 4 different things I think that are actually on your agenda. The last thing that is on the agenda deals with the introduction to Department of Health, and there was a little, I think, DVD or something sent to you all, just giving you a little bit of information about what public health is about and how we use public health in our day-to-day walks of life. And this week is recognition of Public Health Week. It started yesterday and it will end on Friday, so I wanted to just bring it to your attention and mention that this is the 125th anniversary of public health in Florida. We've had a lot of things going on in the last years through public health. February 20th of 2014 marked the 125th anniversary of public health in Florida. The state legislature created the State Board of Health on February the 20th, 1889, in response to a yellow fever epidemic in Jacksonville. Yellow fever in Florida was eradicated in 1905. So we've come a long way. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Also, recently, Dr. John Armstrong, which is our State Surgeon General and Secretary of Health, he commented, just as Dr. Joseph Yates Porter, Florida's first state public health officer, and his colleagues saved Floridians from yellow fever over a century ago. We're committed to solving the top public health threat to Florida families now. And today it's weight challenge, which back years ago it was yellow fever, and now it's epidemic of weight. So I thought that's kind of interesting where we've kind of evolved over the past few years. As you all know, back in February, we actually came up with our own public hero for Walton County, and that was Dr. Curry. I don't know if you all knew Dr. Curry, but he actually did a lot of medical work at the health departments over Walton, Washington, and Holmes counties. So that was the our public health hero. Department of Health had asked each state to acknowledge somebody, and so that was the one that we had chosen for Walton County. There's going to be a publication that's put out in the next couple of months dealing with public heroes across the state. So we'll get that information to you as it comes along. It's a really nice binder that has all the information about the different persons or people that were actually selected over the state. So we'll get that to you. Talking about the Healthiest Weight Florida campaign, I just want to let you know that right now we have 45% of our Walton County adults are living with chronic illnesses, and it's a higher rate dealing with obesity. So that's an epidemic that we've got going right on in Walton County, and that's some of the things that we need to be looking at over the next several months and years to come. We have Walton Community Health Improvement Partnership, that's WCHIP, and I know that you've all aware of that partnership that meets every other month, basically at the health department, and we are looking at several initiatives dealing with weight, dealing with healthy behaviors, screening services, preventive services, and increasing the awareness of our local resources in Walton County to empower individuals to take on their own health initiatives, which is healthy weight, healthy food choices, exercise, and things like that. So while we're celebrating National Public Health Week, which like I said started yesterday and ends Friday, these are some of the very, very important things that come to our mind for Walton County. So I just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention. I think you got a packet full of a lot of information dealing with public health, dealing with Department of Health. There is also a W-CHIP brochure that I want to mention, and that's not just opened up to Department of Health Walton County. It's opened up to a lot of people. You all are invited, and several of you have attended some of the meetings that we've had in the past, and we still are moving forward with that initiative. The last thing I want to mention today deals with public health accreditation. The Florida Department of Health and each of the 67 local health departments in Florida are seeking public health accreditation. We anticipate knowing our status by September 2014. Not only is there value in the accreditation designation, the process towards accreditation has been an incredible journey with positive benefits to our organization, including standardization of policies and procedures, improvements in how we manage documentation of the work we do as a local health department, and increased understanding of the work we do. This is only the beginning, and it's an assessment of our performance against specific measures. We'll know more in September, and I wanted to mention this. There is a accreditation board across the United States. It's called FAB. It's PHAB, and we're the first state in the country to be accredited, to look at being accredited as an organization as Department of Health, not Department of Health Walton County or Department of Health Holmes County or whatever like that. So all of us have to be on the same page throughout the Department of Health to become accredited, and I think that's going to be really important that we're all working together from county to county with this accreditation process. So I just wanted to mention that to you today. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I've got a quick one. How are we doing with the offices in Paxton and in Mossy Head? Are they progressing?
They are progressing. Paxton is not progressing as far as Mossy Head. So, we sent a circular out, or actually, and I think it's in your packet, but it looked like this, and it went to all homes in Walton County. I hope you all got one at your house. If you did not, please let me know. And it has all the branches and everything on it. So we're trying to get a lot of information out there to the public about that. I'm not seeing it growing as fast as I would like to see it, but Mossy Head, we are doing very well at that branch.
Ms.
I have a
Cindy.
question. Did you say 45% of our population in Walton County is dealing with chronic
Illnesses.
illnesses?
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. That's huge.
Yeah. So if you are interested in becoming part of the W-CHIP group, or you'd like to send a designator or a designee, you can go ahead and do that. We'd be glad to have somebody to help us in that initiative to work together towards some of the things that dealing with chronic illnesses and weights and things like that across the county.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hawley.
Thank you.
Got one thing I failed to do. We need to approve the agenda. I need a motion. Get a motion, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is in regards to an update on the South Walton Sports Complex. If you recall, a few months back, you gave staff direction to hold a series of workshops and to gather input from the public regarding what they'd like to see in a facility in South Walton for a sports complex. We held those workshops, and we provided each of you a comprehensive package of material that was presented at those workshops and information gathered at them. In your package is a brief summary of that larger report. And to summarize the summary, staff is to the point where we're seeking additional direction. We believe there's one of three directions that we should go next, and that's either identify the source and amount of funding available for the facility, to determine where the location of the facility would be, and we checked today with all of the four who proposed locations, and those four are still available. And the third option is determine what we want the park to look like. So we had discussions about each of those in our workshops, and what we found. The feedback we got is included in your larger packet. So what staff is asking today is either at this meeting or in the very near future, give us a little further direction as to whether you'd rather us look at funding in both amounts and sources, location for the facility, or the amenities to be included in the facility.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see you come back again with not only the funding identified, but each has its own set of, let's say, issues
Yes, sir.
that need to be overcome in looking at the parcels. And I'd like to see that so that we could even perhaps have a staff recommendation as to a rank order of the options to look at. But certainly the funding aspect would be very important to me, as well as, and I know that some of them talk about location, some of them talk about different things that are at current location that are problematic, just so that we can get an idea of what we're going to be dealing with if we select a parcel. Not only how we're going to pay for it, what do we have to do to overcome those issues?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I looked at the 4 parcels. The one that's the least amount of money is the one that we looked at the very beginning, the one out on East that used to be the old spray field. It comes with a road to it and a turn lane off of DOT. The owner said that he would do that. I think, too, that if we're looking at new vehicles for the sheriff's office, that we ought to use some of that money, the same account, for to buy that piece of property and move ahead on getting some sports fields in South Walton. So I mean, I would be glad to wait on this, but till the next meeting or something, so that everybody can look at it. But when you look at the properties, that one has no residences around it. It's a little bit of wetlands. It's got great access. It's got room for expansion. It may also be adjacent to a new school. I don't know. Mr. Davis could probably tell us that. But as long as these projects take, I would like for us to look at, while we're looking at expending money out of this general funds, that we look at allocating the same amount of money that we allocate for vehicles to go ahead and look at purchasing that particular property.
I know that everybody's looking like we got this $3 million and change coming in, and we've got lots of things to catch up on. But I'd like to see what the various funding options are available to us for each of the parcels, so that we can make a better decision instead of just focusing on one. And I appreciate your comments on that, but I think there are other potential funding options that may allow us to catch up on some of the other infrastructure needs that took a hit as a result of the BP oil spill.
Any other questions? All right, would you need a motion on that, Council?
No.
Just direct staff.
Just to be clear, you want us to look at funding options and look at the 4 parcels and rank them?
Well, I'd like to at least see what you have identified as the specific hurdles or issues that would have to be overcome with regards to each of the parcels, as well as the funding options for each of the parcels. And that would give us a better ability to, I think, make an informed decision.
Okay.
And too, just as an add-on to that, we're dealing with Helen McCall, and I think there's some folks in the audience now that it's gotten to the point where we're battling over who's going to use what field. I mean, we are at the absolute max. So the importance of this is high, and in my opinion, and I think with a lot of the citizens.
Okay. We'll be glad to. We will. I'll get with Mr. Bagby. It may take us 2 meetings, but as soon as we get together, we'll get to work on it. We'll get you that information back.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is we're asking approval to issue an RFP for telecommunication audit services. We actually received an unsolicited proposal from a firm that performs telecommunication bill audits. They have a pretty good record of recovering overcharges, and they simply collect a percentage of what they return back, so there's no fee involved from the county standpoint. So in an effort to see if there is some funding there that may be available to be returned to the county, we'd go through an RFP process and see if there are others that provide a similar service. We don't anticipate it costing any upfront money to the county, simply a portion of what they would recover.
I guess my question is, since the communication services tax comes from the state to us, are they going to go audit at the state level?
I think they, and Rick can probably help us, but I think the idea is they will take a sampling of our bills as they come in and review those and make some determinations how far and deep to go.
Yes, sir. They basically.
Rick, state your name for the
Rick
record.
Wilson for the record. Thank you, Commissioners. Basically, they would audit our record with CenturyLink, with Fairpoint, with any telecommunication company we do for the last 3 years. And then they would bring back those savings to us, and they would ask for 20% of anything they bring back to us. If they don't bring any money back to us, there's no charge to us. They've done this all over the country. In some places, they brought $100,000 back. Some places, it's been $20,000 back. But with the confusing nature of telecom bills, which is it's very confusing, they have a way and a system to go in there and dig through it and find money that where they've overcharged us. You know, last year we brought where they were charging us for a line up in Paxton that hadn't been used for years, and we got a refund back from CenturyLink. Well, they would go to try to identify more of those type of situations. And there's no upfront cost to us, and all we're simply asking is to go out and get more proposals from other companies so we can try to get the best shape for Walton County. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
What's the board's wishes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carried. Mr. Jones.
The next item is we're requesting to issue an RFP for security monitoring services for the courthouse in Funiac as well as this facility. We've identified some areas there that we think we could have some improvements in our service. We currently have an agreement, but we think we can improve upon that. And so we'd like to explore that opportunity through an RFP process.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is, if you recall, at the March 11th meeting, we came to terms with Mr. Brian Brigman for a 10-acre parcel in the Mossy Head Industrial Park. At that same meeting, Mr. Brigman requested and the board granted an option for an additional 3 acres. We've had communication from Mr. Brigman that he wishes to exercise that option. So we're asking you for your approval to sell an additional 3 acres to Mr. Brigman with the same terms and conditions that we approved at the March 11th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
What was that?
Subject to
The appropriate publication by the county attorney necessary to make it a complete deal.
Thank you.
And what was that amount of money that he paid per acre? Was
$20,000.
20? Okay, thank you.
And they were paying the real estate commission, and that will be the same terms under this. And his desire is just to expand the operation that he's bringing.
Okay, great.
Okay, we've got a motion.
Second.
Got a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is we're asking you to consider a request from the Sheriff's Office regarding replacement vehicles. At the March 25th BCC meeting, we had some discussion about how and where to spend or to utilize the proceeds of the BP settlement. One of the discussion topics was utilizing a portion of those funds to replace some of the aging fleet in the Sheriff's Office vehicles. Attached in your packet is a request from the Sheriff's Office where they are requesting that we allow them to purchase 25 patrol vehicles at a total cost of $987,500. I believe Major Preston.
Major Preston, you want to comment?
Major Joe Preston, Walton County Sheriff's Office, for the record. Just thank you for considering this request. I know the windfall from the BP payment can go in many different directions. We would not be here today if we did not consider our ability to respond to public safety service calls a critical element of what we do every day, and the fact that it isn't being impacted by an aging fleet, which is not only shared by us, but we know the county's also in that position as well. It's been a number of years since we've bought any significant number of vehicles for replacement. In fact, our last large order was in 2009 when we purchased 61 vehicles. Since that time, in 2010, we purchased 22 vehicles. Since that time, we have not been on any type of a regular replacement regime or schedule for the vehicles. It's pretty common knowledge through studies done throughout the United States that most police vehicles really hit that tipping point at about 100,000 miles. And as you saw in your packets, the letter I provided to you, over 65% of our fleet is over 100,000 miles. By the end of the year, that number will rise to about 75% of our fleet. So obviously with that many miles, we have other expenses and costs involved in maintaining those.
Major Preston, excuse me, of that 987,500 that you're requesting, not all of that is for the vehicle. That is the ancillary equipment that goes to that vehicle, making it a total of what, 39?
On average, $39,500. That's correct, Mr. Chairman. As some of you may be aware, Ford no longer produces the Crown Victoria, which has been a staple police vehicle for a number of years. As we move over to the Chevrolet Caprice, which also we hope to purchase in county, that requires a different set of equipment. For instance, light bars don't fit the same. The cages that go inside the vehicles won't trade out one for one. Some of the electronics will, but a lot of it won't. So that includes that ancillary equipment as well to fully outfit it.
Major, couple questions.
Go ahead.
In the past, the county's had problems in getting fleet pricing from in-county vendors. Is that going to be overcome?
We certainly think so. We have a state contract that gives us a certain fixed pricing, and we've been assured that they can meet that pricing.
Okay.
If not, reluctantly, we will have to go out of county to meet that.
What will happen to the 25 vehicles you would take out of service?
The ones that are still of some caliber of quality, we will roll those down in our fleet to some of our ancillary units, such as court security, school resource deputies, those kind of things. The rest will be auctioned for whatever we can get from them. Typically, with that kind of mileage, the last couple of years, we've been running about $2,000 per vehicle.
Okay. Will you include that in your budget submission for this coming year?
We certainly would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Subject to the actual price that we retrieve or save from that.
Any other questions? Ms.
Yeah,
Cindy?
what was the total BP net to the county?
3.3 million.
3.3 million, okay. Yeah, we do need a lot of different things. I would, maybe not $1 million worth of cars, but maybe, some figure less than that, because I think there's just so many other departments and so many other needs in the county that we kind of need to spread that money out, I think. So I'd like to see, did we get the estimated tax revenues that were going to come in this time? We were going to get that figure.
The preliminary number we have will be an increase of 3 to 5% on assessed values, so that will.
And what will that total revenue be in
3% is about $1.2 million, so $1.2 million, $1.5 million.
Okay, so
Increase
last
at the same
year
ad valorem rate.
Okay, and then sales tax and all that other thing. I'm trying to get an idea about.
Sales tax, from my conversation with finance, is up about 6% so far this year. Mr. Enfield will probably tell us what that would equate to. Not to put him on the spot, but I will.
I think you're talking about roughly $300,000.
Okay.
Yeah. And I know it's a little early for the budget consideration, but it's been a few years since we've taken care of our employees, and I'd like to see when we get to that point,
I agree.
that we also give due consideration to
We're
helping our employees. And my concern is also going to be, what are we going to face on health insurance? And I realize that Obamacare has got some ramifications down the road, but we've got some costs we need to take care of in the upcoming budget.
right.
Yeah, I agree. So,
And
I'm sorry.
I appreciate Commissioner Meadows' comment. However, coming from a law enforcement background, I'm very sensitive to the needs. I'm very appreciative of how they have made these cars last well beyond what the previous administrations had used and turned them over on. I think that for, well, it's a steep price. I'm going to make a motion to approve the request.
Motion?
Second.
We got a second?
With a question.
Got a question?
How are we,
Oh, go ahead. Ken.
now, how are we, are the sheriff's office gonna submit this, when the cars come in, they gonna submit the bill to the county and we're gonna pay for it at that time, or?
If you would like us to, Commissioner, we would be happy to do that. We'll sign off indicating that the equipment has arrived, and we can submit it to you for payment if you'd like to do it that way.
Was that?
And I'd like to make that not to exceed the $987,500.
Okay.
That's very
So
good.
you're,
Thank you.
How good were you about submitting the bills to the county when the cars come in?
Well,
and then-
they're gonna get the bills, and they're gonna be subject to their
Yeah.
annual audit anyhow, but I mean,
Yeah.
this money is for that, and
Yeah,
they can,
good.
you can arrange a mechanism however you want with regards to them
Yeah.
draw either from the clerk's office or via running the bills past finance, but I think we need to give them the approval so you can get the order in, get the vehicles in,
Okay.
and move on.
okay. Mr. Hudson, do you have a comment? No.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Bob Hudson. Live here in Santa Rosa Beach. I have a couple of questions real quickly for the Sheriff's Department. Number one, he says that they haven't purchased any vehicles out of their capital expenditures, I think, since 2010. Last year, they spent $984,000 on capital. I'd like to know where that went.
Mr. Hudson, what I said was we haven't bought any significant amount of vehicles. You have in front of you here that you can see the number of vehicles that we bought in the last few years.
I have
And-
something in front of me.
and-
No, I don't.
Okay, well,
It's
I'll
a
be
simple
happy to show
question.
it.
How many
I'm
vehicles
happy
did
to
they
show it
buy
to you.
last year?
last year we bought 8 vehicles.
One of the things that I did receive a copy of was something that basically talked about how many vehicles had in excess and what their maintenance costs were running. And Commissioner Enfield wants this proceeds from the auction of vehicles back. And my question is, are they also going to reduce what they spend on maintenance because they're replacing 25 new vehicles at one time? And so would you then turn around and say that reduction in maintenance costs would come back through a reduction in your budget request for that as well?
Well, Mr. Hudson, I'm not sure if that would be, whether you could do it or not. And the reason I say that, yeah, you're going to put 25 new vehicles on the road, but you still got 200 plus that are out there on the road and that are getting older day by day by day. That's possibly going to increase those costs. So that money you might have saved over here at 25 may be needed over here for the other remaining older fleet.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, I think
that brings up question, another question. Which vehicles are you replacing?
But if I may, yeah, I think Mr. Hudson has a good point, and I think that when the budget is submitted, we'd like to see that specifically articulated as to how you have factored that in, because he does have a very good point on that. There are going to be 25 new vehicles that are going to be under warranty. So somewhere down this trickle down, there's going to be 25 that are going to be taken out of the repairs. And I would request that when you do your budget, that specifically be identified as to what kind of savings is being impacted by this. Thank you, Mr. Hudson.
It's just simple math to me that if you replace 25, hopefully you're replacing those 25 that have the highest maintenance needs and things of that nature, and you're going to save some money somewhere. It may not be $200,000, but it's going to be some money that would be there. The other question has nothing to do with the sheriff's request, but it does have to do with Commissioner Meadows' point. There was also, Commissioner Chapman said he had needs within Public Works, and I'm sitting here saying we're dividing this pot up without taking in what I would say would be an overall view at needs throughout the county. And Commissioner Enfield is correct. I think you have needs that are going to be there next year in terms of salary and things of that nature. Who knows what medical costs are going to do. But hopefully you're not anticipating using one-time revenues to pay for those things. I didn't think you would do that, Bill. But my question is, why are we sitting here taking basically a third and pre-allocating it without looking at what our other needs are?
Yeah, that was one of my questions. Was it was just kind of like a shot in the dark, you know? If everybody came up to the podium, every department, and told us what they needed.
I
I'm sure,
understand their
yeah,
need is
yeah.
great, don't get me wrong, but I also believe there are some other needs that are equally great as well. As you look at, if you've got a motor grader that's spending more time in the shop, I mean, that's a substantial
That's
cost.
right, Mr. Hudson, and the thing about it is I got my crew working on trying to give me some idea of exactly what we need to replace now. Now, I'd almost be willing to entertain discussion about replacing public works equipment right now with the remainder of that $3.4 million. Because there's needs there, not only in my district, there ain't a district up here represented that does not have an issue with equipment.
And Bill,
We're now.
that is exactly my point. We're sitting here expending 1/3 of what you have without looking at what your needs are out there. And those needs may be just as great.
I understand that, Bob.
And so that's all I'm saying. It was my understanding that y'all were gonna come back and you were gonna look at all of those, but all I've seen today is the sheriff come in with what he needs, and I haven't seen anything from anybody else.
Well, I think the reason the sheriff is coming here today is
I understand the order in business.
order in business. That's the main thing. He needs to have some idea from us, Bob, is whether or not he's going to have the funding to purchase that. If not, we're going to have to wait. If we put it off, it ain't going to get any better.
If he's purchasing from local vendors, he's not using the state bid.
The state bid
He's
is
using
going
the
to,
state bid price, saying they'll
That's right.
match it, but they're not gonna order those vehicles through the state program.
no, they're not, but they're going to call that same manufacturer up in Detroit and say, send me X number of vehicles for the 2015 model year.
Right, but their position was, in order to get into that state pool, they had to do that by the end of April. And I'm saying is, what is their date if they order from a local vendor?
Well, it goes back to the same thing, whether you're buying it from the sheriff's office or if that dealer is buying it for whomever. They have a cutoff date for those police package, and that is coming up this month. And if that date is missed, they won't manufacture but whatever orders they got in the pipeline.
Okay.
All right? And if that date is cut off, there's no more orders for 215.
Well, you have one more meeting, Bill, before the end of April.
Well, I don't know. Major President, did you ever find out exactly when that
Let
date
me
was?
address that. You're exactly right, Commissioner. What Mr. Hudson may not understand is, first of all, we've done the work on here, and I think we've justified the need for vehicles. We've kicked this can down the road for several years now, and we're at a point to where you don't want, when you call 911, our vehicle to be broken down on the side of the road and us to have to send somebody else to pick that up. The other thing is, you're exactly right. If we don't meet the cutoff order, these Caprices are manufactured in Australia. So if we don't get it, we'll have to go into the next model year, which means we won't even take delivery until October or November. It's a 6-month window. From that, after we rig those out, these vehicles don't actually go on the road until January, February next year, by the time we rig them out and put them on the road. So the savings you will see will have very little impact based on the amount of time we delay the order on the next fiscal year's budget, but will be reflected in the following fiscal year's budget. So it is important to come to a decision and let's get this thing moved on the road. We have 241 vehicles. Of that, the fleet is aged from 1993 all the way to 2014. Now, the 1993 happens to be a large international jail bus that we inherited when we took the jail. We probably won't be replacing that. These 25 vehicles are designed to go on the road as marked units and provide serviceability to the citizens of Walton County.
Okay.
Just kind of a response to that. Number one, I've never said the sheriff didn't need 25 vehicles.
And by the way,
Number
25
two,
is just a start.
One at a time, please.
I've never said the sheriff didn't need vehicles. What I've said is, if I were sitting in your chair and as a taxpayer, I want to make sure you're utilizing the money. Because just like he said, if I have a breakdown, I want somebody to come. Well, you know, I got a cell phone, I can call a wrecker. But if my heart stops, if I live somewhere and I've got no ambulances or they're in bad shape, has anybody looked at that?
No. No, we haven't looked at any other information.
That is my point, people. I can't deny that he needs vehicles and what he's saying about those things. My concern is We're not gonna have an oil spill every 5 years. It's a one-time shot. And we need to get it right. And we need to use those dollars throughout the county to the best of our ability to meet non-recurring needs. And that's all my point is. I'm not gonna argue with the sheriff that he needs vehicles. I have a neighbor that drives one of those very old 19 whatever it is. He's a member of the sheriff's posse, and I've seen it. I understand what it is. But I also understand that we have other needs that are here in the county as well. And sometimes when you sit in that chair, Bill, you divide the baby.
Well, I understand that, and I want to keep this in mind too. I'm not sure that fire EMS have the same issue with a cutoff date for the order of their equipment. So
We don't
they've got a
know.
little bit
You
more
just said-
latitude there.
You just said you're not sure. We don't know.
Well, is there a fire chief in here? Chief?
You know, do we really know, bottom line, what everybody needs?
State your name for the record, please.
Brian Coley, I'm your fire chief. Speaking from personal experience, I know they need vehicles. Things are getting tight for them as well as they're getting tight for us. Personal experience, Sunday night, we tried to transport a very critical patient to Pensacola, and we ended up broken down on the side of the interstate. It's going to happen.
I guess the question,
The order
Chief,
time, the order
is
time for
orders.
an ambulance, you're looking at 6 to 8 months.
But do you have a
No, sir.
cutoff date that you
No, sir.
have to before?
No,
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
There's a lady back on.
Those are just my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. State your name for the record.
I'm Mary Kanoski. I'm a resident of South Walton County. And I just want to reiterate one point that Bob made, and that's when I walked out of our last BCC meeting, my understanding was that we were going to do more of a broad look. And so coming to the meeting tonight, seeing this is a bit of a surprise, and I would request that it be continued, not only to give us time and you time to look at other alternative uses for the money, but I'd also like to see what the possibilities are for Sheriff's Department vehicles to be hybrid vehicles or flex fuel vehicles. Have those alternatives been looked at? If this is going to be a big county purchase of vehicles, doesn't the county want to kind of get with the program and start looking at vehicles that are lower in fuel use and have a smaller carbon footprint? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Got a motion and a second on the floor.
I would like to make one comment. I'm going to vote nay, not because I don't think they need cars and because I don't support, law enforcement, because I think that we're kind of rushing into this. We don't have all the information from other departments, and I think that a third of this fund is too much. So,
Good motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
nay.
Motion carries. Okay, Public Works. You gonna do that for them?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The first item under Public Works is, we have 2 change orders, and it's simply for days on, both on Fat Bell Road. One is for the County Road 2 from Thad Bell Road to State Road 83 to increase time for 31 days, and these are weather days and holidays.
Motion to approve?
I got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Same request, Mr. Chairman, from County Road 2 from County Road 1087 to Thad Bell Road to increase that time of the contract by 31 days as well due to weather and holidays.
Board's wishes.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, in light of these things about the weather delays, there was an article in this morning's newspaper about the delay on Oyster Lake, and from the contract, are there weather delayed changes that are part of that contract? Do we know?
And Mr. Nauer, I think, is here, but those days are figured into their substantial completion time, which was today. Cliff, is that correct? So that they were awarded a few, not nearly as many as they requested, because they couldn't substantiate their request.
And we are not at substantial completion, is that my understanding? And I'm sorry for digressing on the agenda.
And I think it certainly will put, but I'll let Cliff address it.
Good evening, Commissioners. The original
State your name
contract
for the record.
timeframe was,
State your name for the
I'm
record.
sorry, Cliff Nauer, Preble Rish Engineers. The original contract timeframe was due to be over March 29th. And so they've had some additional days due to inclement weather, which is what the contract allows for, which has brought them to April 8th, which is today. And so their contract is up as of today, and that's to substantial completion, which means that traffic is supposed to be open on County Road 30A starting today.
And is that the status?
No, sir. No. They're, just in my best guess, I would say they're probably 3 weeks away from that. Yep. And so they're, you know, they've entered into a contract with the county, and the county's got stipulations on how that's to be handled. And so that's where you're at today.
And we have damages portion to that contract? Okay.
And Cliff, there was no change of request to the board, is that correct?
No, not for the inclement weather, just because that's already part of the contract.
Right.
And so we document those days. They make the request within 24 hours. We document those days, and then we present them to Public Works.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next item is request to approve task order number 14-006 to Tetra Tech for professional engineering services on County Road 395 and US 98 intersection for the improvements that were recently approved. The amount of that task order is $42,905.
Board's wishes.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, staff is requesting the board take action to uncommit preservation funds in the amount of $600,000 from the Natural Bridge property. Over a period of years, there was some attempts to negotiate a purchase of some property in the Natural Bridge community. Part of that was some grant requests that required some matching funds. This $600,000 was set aside out of the preservation buyout fund to be utilized. It doesn't look like, and we don't anticipate that property ever being purchased by the county, so we would request that those funds be uncommitted and placed back into the preservation buyout fund.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
In that same initiative, Mr. Chairman, there was an amount of money, and I believe the original amount was $76,000 that was moved from the general fund into the Natural Bridge property to facilitate that purchase. Again, we don't believe that's going to happen. A portion of that was utilized for a survey or an appraisal on that property. So there's a remaining $73,660 that is obligated out of the general fund for the Natural Bridge initiative. Again, we don't anticipate that initiative moving forward, so we would recommend you de-obligate $73,660 to be placed back in the general fund.
Motion to approve and return it to the reserves.
Second.
Yes.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next item is regarding your appointments to various boards, the Design Review Board, the Planning Commission, the Zoning Board of Adjustments, and the Code Enforcement Board. You have a list of names in your packet of those that either currently serving, those of which to continue serving, and those who don't. What we're passing out to you now are some of those positions are specific to your commission districts, and that each of you have for instance, a member of the Planning Commission that you appoint, but it does require board approval for those appointments. So what we're handing you now has the corresponding names and whose appointee they are, whether they're at large or the specific requirements of those seats. So what we would request is that you take these and at our next meeting be prepared to make recommendations of who you would like to fill those seats. Some of them will be the incumbents in the seats, and some of them, as you see on the list that's in your package, wish to no longer serve, so we'll need replacement appointments for those. So I don't think any of these are urgent. As you can see, some of them have expired, but we set those up that if they expire, they continue serving until someone is appointed or they're reappointed. So if you would, just take that, and for the next meeting, be prepared to make recommendations for those appointments.
Mr. Bagby.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we have a couple items on the agenda. First, we're asking for you to extend the contractual agreement with Sea Haven Consulting, that's Mr. Pickle, for another year. I believe this is the second extension for $102,000. His contract remains the same amount.
Motion to approve.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
The second item is to a request to award the contract. Actually, I believe there's been a change in the wording.
Yes, sir, and I apologize for this last minute, but if you'll amend that. The only change that's been proposed to us is that in the scope of services, there's a statement in the current contract as drafted that the surveys will start at sunrise and finish no later than 8 a.m., which is what the current beach activities ordinance says. There's been discussions about possible amendments to that ordinance. So instead of having a contract that quotes the ordinance exactly, what was suggested and I've drafted is that the surveys will start at sunrise and finish no later than the time specified in Chapter 22 of the Walton County Code is amended. That way, if you choose later to amend the code, then the contract would be consistent with the code.
What's the time in the code?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Okay. Come forward, please.
And you can choose not to amend the code, obviously.
Right. You will state your name for the record. Direct your comments to the board, please.
My name's Derek Lund. I represent some of the small business owners that service the beach. And we would like this vote postponed at this time, if we could, until we could rectify the morning access.
In what way? Rectify what access?
The morning access at the time.
Okay. Some information was provided to me, Mr. Lund. I don't know if you have it or not, but from what all indications is from the data that the Turtle Watch had been keeping up with, from August of last year, August 1st to September 30th, you maybe know what I'm talking about. You're shaking your head that you do. They cleared the beach 1,098 times. And only out of that whole 1,098 times, it was 31 days that they cleared after 7 o'clock, but before 7:30. And only 6 times did they clear past 7:30, but before 8 o'clock. So I tried to do some calculation. I don't think my calculator goes that low, but that's way less than even 1% of the number of times that they're out there. So it appears to me, aside from these few 31 times out of over 1,000, you have access to the beach prior to 7 o'clock.
Well, not exactly, because it's been the law has been the ordinance has been skewed a little bit because it's been the whole block has not just where the vendors are, the whole block has to be cleared before the.
There's 18 sections. Is there not out there on the beach? There's 18 sections, and each one of those sections has some volunteers, 1, 2, maybe more, that transverse that area every morning.
Well, if they are clearing it that early, why is the law 8 o'clock?
Well, probably because you got to give some latitude at a time. But the thing is, they apparently are trying to meet y'all's needs by being off the beach or clear the beach by 7 o'clock. And in most cases, over 1,000 times, they do.
Yes, sir.
So I'm just trying to figure out
Well, that's what we need. We need just a little more time to work with them and figure out what we're going to do. And that's all we're asking is just to postpone this.
Yeah, but the vendors, and my understanding too, is you signed up there of the 18 respective areas, you signed up for 10 of those as to get that alert from the Turtle Watch people once they cleared it. So you apparently have somewhat must be in agreement with that procedure that's in place to at least let you know if it's done at 6:30. You can rock and roll, do what you got to do. But anyway, any other comments?
No, that's all I have.
All right,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would you say that with the change that Mr. Davis submitted to you, that would allow you to change the ordinance if you chose to, and the contract would then reflect what was in the ordinance, so.
Okay, I'm okay with that because I think this way we got it previously written is that we haven't had a full year from the time it was implemented last year going into this year to really see how much of this 1,098 extrapolated out over the turtle season and see what it actually turns out to be. So I think we need to have a little opportunity to allow this to work so we can see and get more accurate, reflective data of what's going on out there day to day.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed,
Aye.
motion carries.
Did somebody say nay?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sleep.
Okay. There's a reverberation in here. Mark was voting, that was it.
That was me. Commissioner Meadows, it's a
I'm
half.
sorry, I thought it was Taylor. Never mind.
Okay, press on.
John Irvin with the TDC, and we have an item in front of you tonight, which is the Co-op Partner Program. This is specifically the cooperative opportunities where bed tax collectors can be part of advertising that the TDC does. We're in front of you today in advance of the budget being submitted, because if we do not start this process now, we won't have sufficient time to execute all of the arrangements with bed tax collectors and still get media placed for next fiscal year. So this co-op media plan has been in front of the marketing committee, the new marketing committee, who unanimously recommended it to the TDC Council last week, who unanimously recommended it for your consideration today. So you have a spreadsheet, which we would specifically be talking about the green sections only, the co-op program, and you have a detailed list of all of the options that we would offer bed tax collectors. Very similar to last year's program, a little expanded through feedback we've heard from business leaders and our committees.
I don't have a colored copy.
I don't either.
The co-op labeled
But I do have
process.
a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
If a co-op partner, do they pay you in advance or do you bill them?
It's a little complicated. They are required to submit payment fairly early before the ad goes out into the world. However, our agency would pay the media publication prior to that occurring, which is standard procedure for the agency to execute on our behalf. And then once we have tear sheets or audit trails or proof that it actually went out to the world, then we would pay the agency back.
Do they submit their payment directly to TDC or do they submit to the clerk of the court?
The payment is handled, trafficked by the agency. They, with all the advertising, the agency traffics everything with the publications with our approval.
So the county's not in the loop on receiving money?
Not county finance, no, sir.
What's the board's wishes?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you very much. And before you're ready to meet, start the update that Executive Bagby will be giving you, but he's just passing around. It is a great pleasure to brag on your team a little bit. These are awards that were given to local staff. This is TDC Walton County staff for efforts in the PR and marketing world. And so we don't chase very many awards. In fact, I don't think we submitted for any last year. But we've been very lucky in that there's 5 Addies coming around, and then the other 2 awards are for efforts that we had in Chicago for Blogger 14 and for emerging markets campaigns, which many of you know with the half cent, we've been conducting those.
Lastly, my favorite award isn't even in the room tonight. Our 10x10 booth, which has traveled to Chicago and will go to Nashville and Miami, was up against all of the industry for best 10x10 exhibition booth, up against organizations like NASA and Disney and other monster brands in the United States. And our booth won best exhibition booth and People's Choice, the only organization to win 2 awards. So thank you to you guys for supporting that, and all the credit to our agency and our local staff. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Commissioners, I'll finish up with the updates. The February bed tax numbers are in. We were up 2.8%. Month over month, February 2014 over February 2013. And for this fiscal year, we are up a total of 2.08% over last fiscal year, which of course was another record year. We have the survey results. I've emailed you the slides that were briefed to the TDC. Last week, as I do my monthly visits, I'll sit down with each of you and go through those slides. The final report we should receive in the next couple of weeks, and as soon as we receive that, you'll get a copy, and then I'll also come talk to you about that, because that incorporates the discussion that went on at the TDC meeting in the strategic planning meeting, and the input from the public that was there in attendance also. We had a very good crowd present. Next meeting, we will bring to you, we believe we will have ready the guidelines for the North Walton County Event Advisory Committee. Our draft recommendation is going to be that each commissioner appoint 1 member, and that the city of Defuniak Springs appoint 1 member, and the city of Freeport appoint 1 member, for a 7-member panel that will advise us on where to invest marketing, the small amount of marketing funds that we've set aside to market the events north of the Bay. I would ask that you have a name in mind, if you could, when you come to that meeting, because we'd like for those folks to meet as soon as, and get set up and running as soon as possible. I know we've got the Marvel of Flight and some other events that are going to be going on, and it may be too late to get some marketing help to them, but hopefully we can get this process started. I also want to remind everybody in the room that if you want to know what the latest is going on with respect to the TDC, please go to our webpage and sign up for the Connections, which is our weekly update that we email out usually every Thursday, and you will know exactly what we know as far as bed tax numbers or meeting schedule or anything like that. And then finally, I want to introduce the 2 newest members of our team, our new Director of Beach Operations, Brian Kellenberger. He's going to be overseeing code enforcement, beach ambassador, and the beach maintenance divisions, as you approved in the new reorganization structure. And then our new executive assistant, Christina Tilton. And subject to your questions, that's all I have.
Oh, Jim, one question.
Yes, ma'am.
The 7-member panel.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a residency requirement? I mean, is there?
We don't have that in there right now, ma'am, but I would tell you that I would probably recommend it, but it's not written in there yet. If I get direction to add that, I would think that you would appoint people that are familiar, either work or live in the north end of the county, that have events that they are familiar with. There may be some folks that work in the north end that live in the south end. I would say that they have to be a county resident, but you know, that's really up to y'all. We're just drafting the guidelines. What y'all approve is what we'll follow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meadows.
All right, anything else? Okay. Well, Mark, you got the floor as usual.
Thank you, Commissioner. First item I have is a request to approve a settlement agreement and general release in the amount of $200,000 paid by the Florida Association of Counties Trust to settle the suit of Mayfield and Branch Banking and Trust v. Martha Engel, now Alex Alford, as clerk of the court, Walton County. Commissioners, let me give you just a short bit of background about this case. During the real estate boom, we had a mortgage presented to the clerk that was recorded, and there was a recordation error on the mortgage itself. It was unrecorded, which was something that the system allowed back in those days. And because of the busyness of the day or whatever, the mortgage was not re-recorded. After that, there were subsequent mortgages and liens, in fact, recorded on the same piece of property. So this mortgage essentially lost its first priority status. When the foreclosure hit, the bank discovered the error and thus the damages. Now, I will tell you, one of the things we learned from this lawsuit, as you may or may not know, back in those days I represented the clerk of court, was that the Florida Association of Counties Trust policy that you have actually covers the constitutional officers for these types of negligent acts. We were not aware of that, quite frankly, as a representative of the clerk at the time. And so if anything good comes out of this lawsuit, we now know that coverage exists. This is the limits of the liability for this particular case. The damages far exceeded this number, so we would encourage you to vote to accept this settlement and authorize the chairman to sign the general release. And by the way, we are pleased to report that we don't know of another instance that this happened right now.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item I have is a request to approve the Beach Safety Program resolution. This is the resolution that makes the legislative findings necessary for the Tourist Development Council funds to be used for the beach safety program to include the lifeguard program. So we would ask you to adopt the resolution and authorize the chairman to sign it.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
As you recall, there's been discussion about using the TIF tax increment financing program to finance improvements along 98, 30A and Highway 331. And we have asked you to approve a engagement letter with Neighbors Gibling for the purpose of assisting us in drafting the appropriate ordinances and financing documents if necessary for that purpose.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next item is a request to consider an ordinance of Walton County amending Chapter 4 to essentially change our roadside vending ordinance. It's come to our attention that when we did it originally, we only included Highway 30-A and those intersections. We are now having the folks doing the roadside fundraising figured out we can just move to Scenic 98 and 98, so they've done that. So we're going to ask you to, today, this will be the first time you've seen this, so I ask you to make comments in the next week, and then we'll have the comments included in a agenda item for the Planning Commission next month, so we can get this thing amended to include Highway 98, Old Highway 98, current Scenic Gulf Drive, and 38. Also, we've had a little bit of a problem in various places on the multi-use path with somebody setting up and panhandling. So without getting into a whole lot of details about whether or not, anyway, we've included, if you'll notice on page 1 of 5, we've included in the designation of roadside fundraising multi-path or other sidewalk systems in addition to intersections, so to avoid that problem as well.
Yeah, in the past, I think there's been some observed panhandling, if you will, or asking for things. Where 331 and 90 come together. Is that a problem for the city, or is that something that?
Yes, sir, I believe that's in the city limits. Yes, sir, they would have to. Yes, sir. And yes, sir, there is a problem there, especially on Saturdays. Mm-hmm. So I'm asking you, you don't need to vote on this tonight, just to give us comments the next couple of weeks so we can get it to, or next 7 days so we can get it to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Next item I have, Commissioners, is I ask you to approve a letter to Anna Richmond with the Department of Economic Opportunity to clarify our intent and our ordinance number 2014-06. This is the E2 change that we did at Sandestin. I got a phone call from actually 2 separate attorneys concerned that when we attached portions of the 1984 agreement to the actual ordinance when we sent it over to DEO, that we might be readopting For instance, the stated open space requirements or findings in that 1984 amendment, that was certainly not your intent. The face of the ordinance certainly does not do that, but just frankly, so we don't have that interpretation come back at some point, I requested Mr. Dice to draft a letter saying that was certainly not our intent. We want that as of record with DEO, and I'm asking you to approve the letter saying that.
Mr. Chairman, before we go forward, I'm recusing myself because of business interests on this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the board's wishes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
motion carries.
And actually, Commissioners, my next item is to approve the actual contract between the Sea Turtle folks that Mr. Bagby's was able to award the bid. This is simply to approve the contract, and I would suppose as amended that I present it to you tonight, if you choose to do that.
Motion to.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is you asked me at the last meeting to do a couple of things to supplement the report to you regarding the pictures of a former commissioner, the current contracted TDC attorney. I did what you asked. I contacted the former executive director of the TDC by telephone on Monday, March 21st, and asked her had she paid all of her expenses associated with the trip. She indicated to me in positive that she did. Commissioner Infeld also asked me to check with the TDC to make sure that the TDC didn't pay anything out of their funds for that trip, and I did that as well. And my information I got back from Ms. Ray is indeed no funds were paid out of the TDC for this trip. So I don't need you to take any action. It's just a report to you folks.
Okay, thank you.
The next item I have is Florida statutes section 197.502 paren 3 require the county commission to apply for tax deeds for those properties that the county commission holds tax certificates on that are valued at greater than $5,000. The tax collector's office has identified 19 of those properties, and the statute doesn't say we should or could. It says we shall apply for those tax deeds, and it will cost us $5,225 to do so. And I'm asking you to authorize the application for those 19 tax deeds.
So moved.
Second.
What do we get in the rate of return in addition to?
What happens, I'm amazed how people ask me this question a lot. I get a lot. What happens is you make the application. We hold the certificate for the taxes. We make the application for the tax deed with the tax collector's office. Then an auction is held, and people bid on the particular certificates. If the bid is greater than the amount we've paid, both for the taxes, if we don't pay them, we get them when nobody pays the taxes or buys the certificates. But if they bid more than that amount, plus more than the advertising cost, the $5,225, then that person purchases the property at the tax deed sale. We would not get the tax deed. We would just simply get our money back. If, however, the bid comes in under that number, then the tax deed is actually issued in the name of Walton County, and we would own the property.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
And Mr. Chairman, just one further comment. I have now received all your comments, those of you who made them, and comments from the Sheriff's Department, and thank you, Major Preston, for that, on the noise ordinance, so we will have that before the Planning Commission. They're not major changes, they're fairly minor changes, but some things they pointed out that they needed in the ordinance, and we're going to make most of those changes and have it to the Planning Commission at next month's meeting, so we're moving along with that process.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Meadows, anything?
I have nothing.
Okay. Sarah's sick. Mr. Infeld.
Nothing for this meeting, but at the next meeting, I'd like to talk about county policy with regards to ordinances and other things when they get presented to the board as to what we would like to see have in our packages regarding them before we're asked to do anything with them. Nothing for tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Pridgen.
Nothing.
I have nothing. Diane Merkel, you present? No. If you will, state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Brown. I'm Vice President of the Heritage Association, and I do apologize for Diane not being here because this is really her baby. She had initiated this back about a year and a half ago. And our request is that we want to have a ceremony of the lake yard, in the courthouse lawn, for a ceremony to rededicate the Confederate monument there. About a year and a half ago, we started, first I might say that as a Heritage Association, our main goal is to preserve the history of Walton County and also any of the historic value. And so I think most of us will realize that the convenient monument was damaged, vandalized, or whatever the case may be several years back. And so we took on that task and we took up donations. It cost the city or the county anything. It's all done through the donations. It has been repaired and it is back on there the way it is. It's the urn with their hand sticking out. So we want to rededicate this and have a ceremony. So our request is to have it at the courthouse lawn. And I think it has already been.
Okay.
And that's April the 28th also. I didn't know if you knew.
At 3 o'clock.
At
Right.
3 o'clock.
Okay, what's the board's wishes?
Motion to approve?
Second, because this is either required
That's
or
a recorded order.
I don't think you do need to take any action. You just know they're there.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that it's okay that we set up there. Also, one other really request that I don't know if the county does that or if you have the prisoners do it or whatnot, but we really would like to have a tent set up with maybe 50 chairs because we have invited a lot of the the veterans, from the different wars, and some of them are quite elderly, so we probably was hoping that we maybe could have about 50 chairs set up. Is that possible, you think?
We're looking for nods, and we're doing so.
Dee Dee says it can happen, so it'll happen.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
Is there any additional public comments? Seeing none. Is there any recap information from staff? Got it all? Okay. Let's take about 5 minutes. We'll start back at 5:20. Are we on? Yeah, we are. Let's come back to order, please. Where's our quorum at? Well, we may have to wait just a minute, trying to find everybody. Where's Bridget? He lost his clock too?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have several items on the agenda. The first two are legislative items. The first item is 14-0248, existing roadway functional classification map, large-scale amendment. I'll ask Tim Weller to come up and give a brief overview of this. We also have some maps indicating the 4 roads we're talking about.
Good evening. This project was the existing...
State your name for the record, please.
Tim Whaler, Planning Department. This was the existing roadway functional classification map, large-scale amendment. It's 13-021. It was an amendment to the comprehensive plan map series, amending the designation of 4 roadways. This included the revisions to the designation of West Hewitt Road between Driscoll Drive and U.S. Highway 98, East Hewitt Road between Talon Way and US Highway 98, Churchill Bayou Road between Church Street and County Road 393. These were all amended from other roadways to minor collectors. The request also included the revision of County Road 393 between Chat Holly Road and US Highway 98. This was a change from a minor collector to a major collector after the January 14th Board of County Commissioners transmittal hearing. The proposal was transmitted to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for review. We received a memo stating there were no comments from DEO and any of the other review agencies that did review it. Staff found that this request did not contravene the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan and would facilitate and result in a logical and orderly pattern of development, and we recommend approval. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do any of these roads, would this include any project, any DRI projects that lie on any of these roads, that front on any of these roads? Are there any DRI projects that would be affected by this road classification?
Not to my knowledge, but I don't know for sure.
No, there's.
I don't think so, Commissioner. We can certainly look at that, but I don't know of any. Matt, do you know of any?
Okay. So it's East, West Hewitt, and
Topsail West PUD.
Topsail
the
West.
Topsail West PUD, where Walmart is located, where the Summerby
right.
Assisted living project is under construction.
Right.
Where the apartment complex on the north side is built. That's all within the Topsail West PUD.
Okay. How would that affect that PUD, that DRI?
It's not going to have any effect on it.
Okay.
In fact, the PUD being there supported the change in classification for these roadways.
Okay. Thanks.
Board's wishes. You got comments, Mr. Osborne? State your name for the record, please.
For the record, Alan Osborne. I support this amendment. I just had one question. Is there a existing right-of-way to meet the definition of what we're now calling these roads? Because since the roads had a different definition before that, the right-of-ways may not be big enough. I don't know. Usually a major collector road has quite a right-of-way available with it. I do support the adoption for the large-scale amendment. But I just wanted that clarified. When we adopt these, are we ensuring that we have enough right-of-way that they'll stay in that classification? We won't have a dispute later on with the neighborhood about whether we're going to put a sidewalk somewhere or something like that.
Okay, Tim, can you respond?
Yes, the land development code indicates there has to be a 50-foot right-of-way. We had Public Works take a look at these roads, and most of the right-of-ways were 66 feet or 63 feet, so they were above that minimum 50-foot requirement for a county.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments?
Motion to approve.
Second. Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the second item under the legislative agenda is request first reading to amend the land development code in regards to lot clearing permits around the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone areas. Something that we have talked about before. The Planning Commission approved this item unanimously, and we're asking for approval for the first reading. And essentially what it would do, it would require a clearing permit anywhere in the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone. Currently, there's some ambiguity in that area, and we're hoping to clean this up so we can make sure that the vegetation is not cut and so forth in that Dune Lake Protection area.
Does it account for all vegetation in there, or is this?
It's certain protected vegetation. If it's unfortunately, environmental had an illness, they couldn't be here tonight. They helped draft this ordinance, but it's my understanding that if it's any kind of invasive vegetation, it can be cut. But typically, it's going to be the native vegetation is what you have to protect.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Any comments? Board's act.
Motion to approve.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next few items are QJ items, so I guess we need to be sworn in.
Anyone who anticipates testifying regarding any item on the quasi-judicial agenda, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you would give before this board will be the truth?
I do.
Has any commissioner had any ex parte contact with anyone regarding any item on the quasi-judicial agenda?
No.
And does anyone have any particular objection to any notice that was provided for tonight's hearings? Hearing none.
Mr. Dodge.
Mr. Chairman, the first item under the QJ number 3 is the John Minger Small Scale Amendment 13-018. At the last meeting, the board continued this item and directed staff to review the road widening plans for 331 in the right-of-way acquisition area. I believe we've done that in your packet, and I believe up on the screen we'll be able to show the limits of that. I'll ask Tim Weather to come up and explain what he has done with this and what the actual request is and how the road widening may or may not affect the request.
Hi, Tim Wheeler, Planning Department. This is a small-scale future land use amendment application submitted by Kermit George requesting the approval of the amendment of the future land use map designation from estate residential to general commercial. The project includes an 8.95 acre portion of the area identified in the parcel. Unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the proposed amendment of the adopted future land use map from estate residential to general commercial will be consistent with the Walton County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code. I did have the GIS department develop a map illustrating the location of the proposed right-of-way. I did include the map in your packet, and it's also up there on the screen. It's approximately 185 feet of the frontage of the parcel is identified as the proposed right-of-way.
And what will the building setback be off of that 185 foot, or off of actually 331? What is our building setback going to be?
We haven't established any new building setbacks for the US 331 corridor. They would be the standard county setbacks.
So, and what is that? Tell me again.
For commercial, it'd be a 25 foot.
25 feet, okay. Okay.
And I'm sorry, Matt, we didn't change that in the proposed 331 corridor standards? I couldn't remember.
No, we did not.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought we did anyway. Okay.
A quick question. In the description of the adjacent parcels, it says the one to the west is general commercial. Which is the one that is the general commercial? Is it to the west of 331, or is it?
It's to the west of the area that's being requested to have the land use change done.
Can you put the cursor on it so I can make sure I understand which one you're talking about?
The request is for the area that is hashed.
Okay, but that area is not on 331.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, and I guess that kind of comes up once we determine that it was a singular parcel was the change. So if you can turn the future land use map back on, the parcel directly across 331 is estate residential.
So you've got estate residential on two of the sides, general agricultural on one?
Yes, sir.
And on the west side of 331 is commercial?
The west side of the proposed area, the west side of 331 is estate residential. So you have general agriculture on the east, estate residential to the north and south, and then the western portion of the subject parcel is general commercial. So across 331 from the parcel in its entirety is estate residential.
But Commissioner, I think here is that the hatched parcel and the parcel that abuts it to the west is owned by the same owner, and they have merged the piece as one singular piece, correct?
Yes, they've refused what was initially one parcel and remains one parcel ID.
Which now creates in the comp plan language, we have location criteria. It says it has to abut 331. This parcel technically does now abut 331.
So let me ask you
Correct.
a question about that. So what if everybody did that? They just joined all their parcels together, then we'd have commercial like for miles back into the rural area. Is that?
But I think the difference here is this was one lot of record at one time. And in 2011, they actually did the lot split to separate this initial lot of record parcel. So the fusion just rejoined that lot of record that existed.
And they lost about 188 feet along the frontage of 331.
And so what is the depth of the lot? What is left after you take 188 feet out of there?
I don't know.
The front parcel is 1,050 feet. So if you subtract 185 out of that.
Okay.
So the area at the front is about 1.35 acres that would become right of way.
Okay. Okay.
And the entire parcel is 17.91 acres.
Okay.
So the West Indian Creek Ranch Road that would run from 331 to the east
Yes.
would separate, on the north side it would be commercial, and on the south side it would be estate residential?
Correct.
And how wide is that right away?
I believe it is a 60-foot right of way.
Is it paved?
It is currently not paved.
No, it's not paved.
I think that Commissioner Indian Creek Ranch is we're in the process of trying to get funding to pave that through there in a couple of phases.
Yeah.
Is that in your district?
It is.
When you say they're trying to get funding, you mean from the county or
From Scott. From the state.
From the state.
Yes.
It is a 60-foot right of way for Indian Creek Ranch Road.
Would they access off of 331 or would they access off of Indian
They'll access
Creek
off
Road?
331.
They would access
We
off-
we haven't seen any design proposals that would.
But
And the general, the commercial that they want to, that they're asking for allows, what does it allow?
So would this be like an industrial park that they're putting there?
They stated that it would be retail-oriented commercial.
Mr. Chairman, I think the applicant is here, I believe, if you.
Does the applicant wish to speak? If you will, come forward, state your name for the record.
Kermit George, agent for John Minger, Southern Engineering Group. Mr. Minger advised me that he would reduce his request for the area of this change, maybe down to 5 acres, if that would make this more palatable to the board and to the people.
So
5 acres, which way?
Well, reduce it to the east, make it less intrusive to the east.
So it would be like split it in half, you think? Is that?
Yeah, pretty close.
Put up that other thing, yeah.
It's about 8 acres, I think.
Split it in half where that line would be, kind of right there. It's 8 acres. Okay.
Well,
No,
that
there.
What about there?
Is that the one we're talking about, is the hatched one?
Yes, so that's the one that we're asking to be
Yeah.
changed.
And you're offering to reduce that by 5 acres?
Yeah, well, I'd like to reduce it to 5 acres, to 5 acres,
Reduce it
a
to
5
5
acre change in the front, on the west side.
That would make it more palatable. I don't know if,
I'm a little confused.
yeah, he would.
Where do you want the 5 acres coming off?
Adjacent to the red.
The hash.
Adjacent to the red.
Red, okay.
Right.
And 5 acres back towards the east, wherever that line
Would
is.
leave that as it is.
So there'd be 3.95 acres that would remain
Yeah,
estate residential?
right.
Okay.
Can you do that in a hearing like this? Can you just change the legal description?
If the applicant is willing to tonight, say he is amending his application for that purpose, then yes, we can. Since it's actually less than what he was asking for at the planning commission, then yes.
Yeah.
That is our desire to do that.
Excuse me?
If we want to do that.
Okay.
yes.
Is there-
Thank you, Mr.
I'd like to hear if there's anybody in the audience.
Is there any comments? Come, Mr. Pauls, come on forward. Mac, go ahead.
We would need a new legal description for the reduced area as soon as possible, since we have a 10-day window to submit this to the state, the ordinance. So if you approve it tonight, we need the legal description and the ordinance to be able to be signed within 10 days and submitted to the state.
That's correct.
So if we can get a legal description pretty quickly, we could work with it.
Right.
Yeah. Mr. Pauls? Mr. George, let him come forward, please.
For the record, my name is Tim Pauls. Good evening, Commissioners. I appreciate the applicant's offer, but I do not believe that it's warranted unless it was limited to the amount of property that he was going to lose on 331. The Walton County Comprehensive Plan says that the county shall not assign the GC land use category to any parcel unless there is a clear demonstration of need and the location is compatible with the surrounding area. Just taking a look at the map that you have up, and you can see that it is not compatible. I have prepared some additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Pauls.
With regard to the surrounding area, and I have highlighted, and I have one for the option. I have highlighted individual properties that would be directly across from this proposed change.
Mr. Pauls, let me interrupt you. I'm going to mark your documents as objectors exhibits 1 through 9. I think there's 9 pages. And that way, when you refer to them, you'll have a common reference.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't have any objections from the staff, I'd like to accept these into evidence as well.
So moved.
And the point I was trying to bring to you, and I apologize for just black and white copies, but my color copier didn't work so well, was just to show you that what is across from this proposed property is single-family residential, and many of it's been homesteaded. If it's been homesteaded, and this is based upon the property appraiser's website, so I have no information beyond what's on the property appraiser's website, and he has a disclaimer about whether or not it's correct or whatever, so I guess I'll have that same disclaimer. I can't verify anything beyond the property appraiser's website. But what you will see is that most of the properties have been homesteaded across from this, and they're in estate residential. Well, one of the worst things you can do to a property owner is put commercial across the street from their house, because it is usually very detrimental to their property value. So the applicant states in a so-called feasibility study that this is going to be for retail, offices, and so on and so forth. That's never going to happen here. This is more than a mile from the hospital, and there's probably thousands of acres available to be able to be developed around the hospital for offices or whatever. You want medical facilities to be developed as closely as possible to a hospital, not a mile away. It's not going to happen. What will happen is that if you approve it, you will have a general commercial intruding into general ag. You jump about 4 different land use classifications, and you will have no buffer. And that's a recipe for disaster. Really is. Now, I can understand the applicant wanting to be able to have more commercial because they think it's going to make the property more valuable, and they paid a lot of money for it at the top of the market, and they would like to recoup it. And isn't that the truth? A lot of us have been there. But this isn't the right thing to do for this area. Furthermore, I called the county and I requested any plans that have to do with the widening of 331. I spent 3 hours on the internet trying to find this particular project. It's there. Greg Graham, your county engineer, told me there are no plans available to be seen for this project, that the right-of-way has not been determined exactly where it's going to be. Now, you have a resolution with regard to the hospital, so did the Funiac Springs. And if anything, they wanted the right-of-way to be moved to the west, which would impact this property even less. Not to the east, to the west. So what I'm saying to you is that this is premature to be adopted. The applicant will well be able to come back within a year and resubmit an application to have this property looked at again. I know, I've been there. I've been denied, and I've come back, and we got approved. It takes something. It takes a lot of diligence. But again, there is no evidence that there is a necessity for this to be changed to general commercial. Thank you.
I have one thing to add. The minimum density on a state residential is 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. So if we do make the eastern half only 3.95 acres, it technically wouldn't support a dwelling unit.
The whole site wouldn't support a dwelling?
Well, that portion of the site, if it is parceled out.
We can't create a lot that doesn't meet density.
Right, but if they've been fused back together and they're all one property now.
No, I mean, as far as the offer to reduce the request down to 5 acres,
I
it's
see.
an 8.95 acre parcel, which would leave a remainder parcel that we would not change of 3.95 acres, and that would not meet density for that land use
The remainder
criteria.
parcel.
If we do it the other way, it would work.
One thing is, I think we need to come up with a policy. I don't know if we have one or not, or if we do. Preservation of rural lands and these estate farms is going to be really critical, especially when this road goes even further north to the Alabama line. We need to come up with some kind of an idea about, how we want to treat our rural lands that are going to be abutting and close to, this major highway.
How did we come up with our yellow line if we don't know what the right-of-way is going to be?
Well, they stated here as source data, it said proposed 331 right-of-way as of 12/20/2012, which I'm assuming is the latest data that GIS had available to them. So they indicate that it is the proposed right-of-way and certainly not
the end-all, be-all.
correct.
Well, my conversations with Clayton Atkinson concerning that, of course, the hospital has made 2 or 3 requests to DOT to shift that right away back towards the west because of how it was going to impact the hospital. The last meeting was probably about a month ago, and he's not sure what the DOT is going to be accommodating. It could be that it's going to be right where it is. Now, just above Indian Creek is where it's Mobile Village Road. That is where the assisted living facility is, and they're already moved or starting to locate a spot to move the residents out of there because of the right-of-ways infringement there, as it sits right now. Now, whether or not they do any modifications, I have no idea, and I don't know when we'll know. This is apparently going to be the last phase of that whole project.
Mac, did I understand you correctly? Did the code prevent us from creating a lot that is not buildable or not usable for its classification?
Yes, it does.
So we couldn't accept the offer if we wanted to?
We could accept the converse of that offer and change the 3.85 and leave a 5 acre parcel in a state residential, and that way that would still be a lot that meets density. The remainder lot would be.
I've got a question for Mr. George, if he would. I mean, I believe I've heard that there wouldn't be so much opposition if you were to lose 185 feet in from 331 due to the state's taking, if we just took 185 feet into the western part of the hatched area, is that an acceptable position?
We could accept that.
Mac, that would leave more than 5 acres.
That would leave
Yes, it
more
would.
than 5 acres in the back.
Okay.
That would be acceptable.
So if we went with, correct me if I'm wrong, we said at the beginning 185 feet is what was roughly in this.
It's what is proposed,
All right.
but
So-
it could change, Bill.
Well, Mr. Minger says they've taken it. He tells me they've taken the 185. It's a done deal.
They take it and pay for it?
So
Yeah.
I don't, however it worked, he just said they took
Yeah.
it, so I didn't ask him.
And Mr. Pauls, am I correct, was I correct in understanding that you would be less objectionable to it if it was just limited to the 185 feet coming in?
Yes, that's correct. He's basically replacing what he's lost, but they haven't really lost it, they've got to pay for it.
Okay.
But that's the way it
I
works.
understand. So, again, Mr. George, are you amending it to say
I will amend it to that, yes.
185 feet?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we in a position to, I'd make a motion to approve that.
A second.
And that, excuse me, Mr. Carpenter, that would make it still available for the estate residential for the remainder of that parcel?
Yes, that parcel would still meet density.
Motion?
Second.
Second. Any further comment?
Just so we're clear, the applicant's request is to only extend the designation 185 feet to the east,
That is right.
and the remainder would remain estate residential, and we'll have to have a survey, legal description in the next 3 days. Does that give y'all plenty of time before Friday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
before
legal
Friday.
description.
Just wanted to.
Okay. A motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next item on your agenda is number 4, a major development order for city produce. I'll ask Brian Underwood, senior planner, to come up and present this.
Good evening, Brian Underwood, Planning and Development Services. This is a major development order application submitted by Jenkins Engineering requesting approval to develop 17,540 square feet of distribution space and 2,900 square feet of office space on a parcel of 5.27 acres with a future land use of light industrial. The project is located on the west side of North County Highway 393, the intersection of 393 and Market Street, identified by parcel number 27-2S-20-33210-000-0030. The project does propose to impact wetlands on the parcel, which totals 2.53 acres, subject to permitting through the Corps of Engineers and Florida DEP. Those wetlands would be restricted to a intensity of 0.1 impervious surface ratio per the Comprehensive Plan Policy C-1.1.3.3. There are no known code violations on the subject parcel, and unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the project will be consistent with the Walton County Comp Plan and Land Development Code when the comments and conditions which are stated are met. Those conditions are on page 8, and the Environmental Department requests that all wetland dredge and fill permit applications be submitted and the permits be obtained prior to initiation of construction. And per the South Walton Fire District, a fire suppression system is required for the project, and the South Walton Fire District wants to conduct a final inspection of the project prior to final approval.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Come forward, sir. State your name for the record.
Commissioners, Jamie Eubanks with Jenkins Engineering. I think Brian did a pretty good job recapping it, but I'd be more than happy to take any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. The road to the south, it looks like y'all would be paving it to that point, the little area. Yeah, y'all would pave it to that point?
That's correct, Commissioner. What actually occurred on this property is there's actually an existing easement that actually runs down the center of the property. They're actually going to shift that easement to the south side, and part of those deals is they would stub out that road about halfway, along with water and sewer as well.
Okay, so that road connects into Helen McCall Park, is that correct?
No, ma'am, this is on the north side.
It's on the north side. This is not the piece that has, okay, I thought this was on the south side. Okay. Where would that road go? Where does it go to the west? What's over there?
At this time, it's undeveloped. It's just a private developer.
Okay.
We've just left it in place. Should he, obviously, we don't want to landlock him in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I thought this was in that parcel that we were looking at to connect to Helen McCall, but, okay.
It's actually just south of the fire department and Preble Rich's office in that area.
It looks identical to the site to the south, so, okay, thanks. And when you say, I'm sorry, when you say city produce, is it going to be can you tell me?
It's actually going to be at one of their main distribution centers.
Okay.
So should be a nice.
So they just bring the produce in and then.
That's correct.
Pack it up. And
They've got some other places, I believe, in Crestview and
Okay.
some other areas.
Okay.
My understanding from the planning commission, it would not be retail. Is that correct?
Oh, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Wouldn't be retail. Okay. How many jobs? Do you know how many jobs it brings in?
I do not know that.
Okay.
Hopefully many.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
What's the board's wishes?
Public comment.
Well, is there any public comment?
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second.
Third.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, next item on the agenda is number 5, Duncan 4-lot subdivision plat. I'll ask Tim Whaler, senior planner, to come up and give a brief overview of this project.
Tim Whaler, Planning Department. This is a plat application submitted by Nobles Consulting Group. It's requesting the approval of Duncan 4-lot subdivision plat. The plat consists of 4 single-family lots on 1.96 acres with the future land use of neighborhood infill. The major development order associated with this plat was 13-001-00048 Duncan 4-lot subdivision. There are no known code violations on the subject property, and we received no public comment on the plat. And unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the requested plat will complement the land development code and the comprehensive plan and Florida statute chapter 177. I would like to point out that the plat reflects what was approved on the site plan, which did include the 100-foot shoreline protection zone for the dune lake and also the 300-foot dune lake preservation requirements of 25% clearing.
Yeah, I like the fact that they're going to only put 2 driveways in and they're going to share for the 4 lots. I think that cuts down on a lot of the access issues out there. Yeah, this didn't come up in my grant because I don't know why, because I kept refreshing it, but I looked at Bill's copies. Okay, that's good.
Is there any public comments? Seeing none.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the last item on the agenda is number 6, Alice Beach replat of Block P, Lot 10 and 11. I'll ask, again, Tim Whaler to come up. Brief presentation.
Tim Whaler, Planning Department. This is a plat application submitted by Interlight Engineering requesting the approval to replat lots 10 and 11 of Block P of the Alice Beach Phase 2A plat. In the approved Alice Beach Plan Unit development, it consists of 0.178 acres with a future land use of traditional neighborhood development. The proposal is to replat 2 of the currently platted lots and shifting an internal lot line 18 inches. There are no known code violations on the subject property. There were no public comments received, and unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the requested plat did meet the development order and meets the requirements of Florida statute, chapter 177, comprehensive plan, and the land development code.
Is there any public comments? Seeing none.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Is that it, Mr. Dodge?
Yes, sir, it is, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we stand adjourned.
Okay, well,